Before this video starts, if you enjoy this video, there are many more like it on the channel already, with many more like it to come in the future, so subscribe. I'm trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so I'd really appreciate it. Also, drop a like on the video so it does better in YouTube's algorithm. Today I wanted to talk about a few players from the past who I believe would be better in today's NBA. The evolution of how basketball is played has been accelerating at an incredible rate over the past few years, mostly thanks to the dominance of the Golden State Warriors, and looking at the modern game and then comparing it to the NBA not even a decade ago, it can almost make you feel crazy watching it. Don't get me wrong, I've been enjoying these classic games that the NBA has been streaming on their YouTube channel recently, but when I'm watching those games, I'm almost going crazy thinking like, oh my god, can you get some shooting out there? Looking at it now, I don't know how it took so long for the NBA and basketball to figure out that spacing is very vital. And because of that spacing, offenses today are the best they have ever been. Teams are averaging historic numbers both in points per game as well as efficiency. Basketball as it is played now has really maximized scoring in the NBA, and I enjoy hypothesizing about players of the NBA's past playing in today's league. What players were considered good who would be great today, and what players were considered great then that would be even better today? Let's find out. First, I want to put a focus on two players that were considered role players in their time that I think would be stars in the modern NBA. Starting off, I want to talk about Lamar Odom. A while ago, I made a video called Lamar Odom Draymond Green before Draymond Green. That video wasn't good, like most of my videos. And I actually don't agree with that comparison anymore. But what I was really trying to say with that comparison, I think, was that Odom was a versatile modern-day four in the 2000s and 2010s, well before his time, while Green is also a versatile modern-day four. But Odom was all about the offense, unlike Green. Not that he was a bad defender, but he's not an all-time great defender like Draymond Green is. But offensively, Odom was well ahead of his time. As a power forward, he would lead offenses. He was not just a good ball handler for a power forward, he was a good ball handler, period. He also had great vision. His assist numbers were consistently pretty high for his position, with prime averages of 4 assists a game and a career best of just short of 6 assists per game, but those numbers did not reflect the level of playmaker that Odom was. He saw things that most players could not, and he often got fancy with it with some really fancy passes. In terms of putting the ball in the basket, Odom was a great ball handler, like I said, and that translated to him being a great slasher. At 6'10" with long arms with solid athleticism and again the ball handling, Odom could get to the basket with relative ease, where he shot in the 60s for his career. He had a decent mid-range game, and depending on the year he could hit a 3, but shooting wasn't really a strength of his. But I like to look at moving up players from the past to today through this lens. There are two ways to look at talking about all-time players and bringing them into the modern game. You can look at it as I am plucking that player from their era and just dropping them straight into the modern NBA with no adjustments. Or you can have that player have their childhood growing up falling in love with basketball in the 90s or 2000s rather than when they originally did, and that would shift how they view how basketball is played today, and they would develop their skill sets to mesh with how the game is played today. For example, say Jordan was born in 2000 and he came in the same draft class as Luka Doncic. Would Jordan not come into the NBA shooting 7 3-pointers a game? I think he would. He would have grown up watching 3-pointers become more and more essential to how basketball is played. It's why I don't like when people use his 3-point shooting against him when three-point shooting didn't matter in his era for the most part. There are players like Magic Johnson that I think if you just teleported to the modern NBA, they would struggle due to poor shooting and ball handling that doesn't hold up to the modern game. But let Magic grow up in the 2000s and 2010s, and I guarantee you he comes into the league with a much better jump shot and much more modern handles. Because those two elements are an essential part of basketball now, but they were not in the 80s. So today, I think Lamar Odom would be a pretty damn good three-point shooter because that would be a bigger part of the game. He would basically be a skinny Ben Simmons with a jump shot, just with a little bit worse defense, and that's a damn good player and a multiple-time All-Star. Next, I want to talk about my all-time favorite defensive player, and that is Andrei Kirilenko, aka AK-47. Kirilenko, I feel, is the most underrated defensive player in the history of this game. Because I feel he is one of the greatest defensive players, period, and you don't often see his name in that conversation. Andrei was 6'10", 240 pounds with a 7'4" wingspan. He was supremely athletic, he had an incredibly high defensive IQ, and he put all of his effort on that end. So when you paired both of those factors with his size and athleticism, it made for one of the greatest defensive players of all time. His athleticism led to the vertical that would allow him to block shots, but also the speed to keep up with the guards on the perimeter. He is one of the few players in NBA history that could legitimately guard 1 through 5. And while yes, defensive box score stats mean almost nothing in terms of how actually impactful you are defensively, Kirilenko did stand out in that area as well. In his best 3-year stretch from 2003 to 2006, Kirilenko averaged 3 blocks a game and 1.7 steals, with him averaging 3.3 blocks and 1.9 steals at his peak in those categories. And then offensively, Kirilenko's athleticism made him a freak on the fast break, really good at finishing at the rim, and he also had solid handle and vision. He had a few seasons where he averaged 4 assists a game. He also was a solid enough three-point shooter. He was really inconsistent from outside, but his ball handling and passing vision makes me think he could play a Draymond Green role in a modern NBA offense, used as a role man that makes plays, but he also would have the size of a true 4. And if his jumper fully developed, he would essentially be Giannis, but he's able to focus all of his energy on the defensive end, which is scary, and then Draymond Green on offense with a jump shot. That is a damn good player and basically a dream power forward. Andrei did make an all-star team in 2003, but for the majority of his career, he was viewed as a role player, and unfortunately, for even a bigger majority of his career, he was used as a small forward because being that quick made people think he was just a tall small forward. He was ahead of his time. But in today's game, utilized correctly, he would be a multiple-time all-star. But those are my 2 non-star players that I think would be great in today's game. Now I want to talk about 2 star players who I think would be even better in today's game. For these 2 stars, I'm probably going to elaborate on them less because I'm going to assume you know a good amount about them already. I made a video on Allen Iverson not too long ago calling him overrated. And for the most part, I still stand by that. I still routinely see people put him over Dwayne Wade all time, which I think makes me comfortable in believing he's still overrated. However, I don't think I was entirely fair to Iverson in that video because of how much of a victim of circumstance he was, and I didn't really give him that benefit of the doubt as much as I should have. I still think his 2001 finals run was wildly overrated and gave way too much of a boost to his legacy for what it was. Still think his numbers were inflated box score wise, but in a modern offense, I think that issue would solve itself and make him quite efficient in the process as well. AI's ability to create off the dribble surrounded by shooting would be truly unstoppable, and in today's game he would be utilized as a ball handler more than he was. Iverson was often misused in Philly. Larry Brown somehow looked at AI, the greatest ball handler of all time at that point, and his first instinct was to put him at shooting guard and play him off ball, using a bunch of Iverson cut plays. That's an incredible misutilization of his talent. I argue for off-ball movement being essential over and over, but he was almost used off-ball more than he was on, which is insane to me. But next, we are going to discuss a player from a long time ago in NBA history. Last three guys have been 2000s players, but now we're going back to the 50s and 60s to look at Bill Russell. Looking back at the 60s, there are very few players that I think would be better in today's game. The league and the sport was just too much in its infancy. The talent wasn't there yet. But with Russell, while I certainly don't think his resume would be improved, that would basically be impossible, I think his actual talent on the court would be used better. But he also isn't winning multiple MVPs in today's game or winning 11 championships, so you could argue that he wouldn't be better. But I'd say that Russell winning those MVPs and championships was a product of his era, and even though the resume would not look better and he would probably rank lower all time, he would be better. Now, I'm sure there are many people that are going to view that statement as crazy. However, I don't think people are too aware of just how insanely ahead of his time Bill Russell was. First of all, Bill Russell is potentially the greatest defensive player of all time. I would even say he probably is, but just because there's not enough video evidence, it can be a little bit anecdotal. He was an amazing shot blocker, as you would expect out of a center in the 60s, but the switch ability of Russell is well understated. He was very fast. If you go back and watch the highlights, he was very fast and agile. His length, speed, athleticism, all of that combined with his incredible defensive IQ would make him the perfect defensive five in today's league. He was basically Rudy Gobert and Draymond Green as one defensive player. And then offensively, yes, he wasn't a particularly good scorer, but he was a great, and I mean great, passer. He averaged 4.3 assists for his career, 5.8 at his peak, and that was back when scorekeepers were very stingy about rewarding assists. In today's game, I could see him playing a Jokic-like role on offense, averaging 7 to 8 assists a game while being the best rebounder in the league, being the best defensive player in the league, and being the best leader in the league. Because Russell was also an amazing leader. It's the main reason that he was so successful in the NBA. His leadership mattered more for the Celtics' success than his actual talent did. And then in terms of actually putting the ball in the basket, Russell was not amazing, but again, wasn't playing with any kind of spacing whatsoever, wasn't even a three-point line. But also, he was putting up 20 points on solid enough efficiency in the playoffs pretty consistently, so I think he would be fine. Just regular season, he wouldn't have been as amazing. But Jokic's passing, solid enough scoring, let's say 16 points a game or so, the best rebounding in the league, best leadership in the league, best defense in the league, his game would translate beautifully, and I think with him being used as that Jokic-type guy with a bunch of shooting, his box score would be pretty nuts as well. Surrounded by shooting and perimeter players, he would just simply be an amazing two-way player. And I think in today's game, he would be at minimum a top 8 player and probably a top 5 player. But that's the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.